So, welcome everybody. And does everybody know how to put hands up if they want to? Because we're all on one screen at the moment, so that should be fine to wave at me. But if I don't see, it can always help to put a hand up. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, to that smiley face that says reactions, and press there, you'll discover that you can put a hand up, and then you can also lower the hand again. So just check you can do that. That's good. And Royston's discovered the thumbs up sign. Thank you. That's good. So
where are they?
If you go to the bottom of your screen, got it? Yeah, excellent.
But I should unmute.
Yes, because if you that's it, because it will bring you top left on my screen. So if I haven't noticed you waving at me, then I will notice the yellow hand. So good. Okay, just a brief bit of housekeeping there. And just, yes, hijab. Sorry, I can't hear you. You seem to have, sound seems to have gone.
No sound.
Ah, no sound? No, don't know what's happened there. Have you switched your microphones on? But have you somehow muted the sound on the screen? Because have you muted the volume somehow? Dana, hi. And right, did you find?
Hi, I'm just organizing a few things and I'll get my video going.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, hijab will be back, I'm sure. And so, yes. Is everybody here most people are Alexander teachers, I know. Is anybody here not an Alexander teacher? Either wave at me or put the yellow hand up if you're not an Alexander teacher, please. Yeah. Good. Hisham, you're not. And sorry, anyone else? Sebastian? Yeah. So, and have you had quite a few lessons, the two of you? Just to catch up, 10 lessons.
I'm studying with Gabriele Bräuninger in Frankfurt. Right,
brilliant. Yes, that's so you're a student. Fantastic.
Yes.
Good, and everybody is welcome. So who's got a copy of my book?
Haven't.
Yeah, a few people. Lovely, thank you. Lovely. Lisa, which Lisa are you? Let's say hello to Lisa. Who am I talking to? Do you want to unmute, Lisa? Hi there. Do you want to introduce yourself, Lisa? Or Lisa? Not hearing. Not to worry. Okay, so who doesn't know my work at all? That's some people. Yeah, okay. Good. Right. But you're a teacher, Royston.
I'm a new teacher.
Excellent. Yes. Okay, I just like to get a feel of who I'm addressing, as it were. That's fantastic. Lovely. So I'll talk for about 15 minutes and then we'll open up the discussion to everybody. So let me start by telling you where I started, which was I was a zoologist. I did a zoology degree and I loved whole animals. I always loved just learning about behavior and ecology and whole animal interactions and so on. And then I started a PhD, and boy, was I in the wrong place. And after a year and a half, I actually started to crack up because it really was not me at all, and it was very stressful. And fortunately, my back seized before my whole of me broke down. So that took me to my first Alexander lessons. And they were lovely. My first two teachers, they were both Carrington teachers. They were quiet. I was not invited to do anything other than experience and just be there. I was allowed to be completely passive. I wasn't asked to think, to do anything, which was just what I needed at that overwrought mental state that I was in at the time. But it didn't particularly change as I went on. I had lessons for 2.5, nearly 3 years with different teachers. First from the Carrington tradition, then from the MacDonald side of things, and none of them really asked anything of me. And then I trained, and I went to Misha Magadoff to train. He was wonderful. I loved the life there and the vibrancy, and there was place to explore and to freedom to move. But it was, I work on you and you work on me, and still nothing was really asked other than the set directions while you were being worked on. But Misha's built tremendous confidence. You sort of knew what you were doing, putting hands on. And so when I finished, I went out and built a good practice. And within 6 months, I'd fallen apart. I really was not coping. And I realized I really didn't know how to look after myself. So I tried going back to the school and to John Hunter, whose work I loved, but it was too familiar, and I realized I needed some new input. And at that point in London, which was 1989 at that point we're up to, there was a whole choice of first generation teachers. And I chose Miss Goldie, partly because she was closest, and partly because I knew John Hunter had been to her, and I very much admired his work. And Miss Goldie lost no time in telling me that I was a complete mess and that I knew nothing. And she would say things to me like, "You ask me that? And you call yourself a teacher of the Alexander technique? Why, Mr. Alexander would be turning in his grave to see what you are doing in the name of his technique." She had a way of speaking that means that 30 years later, you can still hear the voice as it was spoken. It was quite extraordinary. She was 86. For those of you who don't know who she was one of Alexander's very first teachers. And you don't talk to a new teacher like that. You just don't. It was outrageous. But I actually didn't mind, in a sense, her haranguing, because what she was saying to me really was, you're a mess and you don't know what you're doing. And that was a relief, because most teachers put hands on me and went, "Oh, yes, hitting up nice free hips, nice free neck. Yes, you can come in out of the chair nicely. That's all nice, nothing wrong." And I knew there was a lot wrong. And so I thought, well, if this woman actually can see I'm a mess, just maybe she can sort it. So I put myself in her hands. And I brought to the situation the same passivity of you stand in front of the chair and allowed yourself to be worked on that I'd brought up till this point. And it turned out not to be enough, because weeks of this lesson, somebody needs to mute. I'll just mute. That's better. So 6th lesson, she challenged me. She said, "How many lessons have you taken with me so far?" 6, Miss Goldie. "I don't know why you bother. You have not begun to think for yourself away from here." And she harangued me all lesson. I was in tears, and part of my head was thinking, I could walk away from this. I don't have to take this. And another part of me was thinking, I'll show the old bat. And it was the right decision. And So I went home that evening and I was about to pick up my kettle. And I stopped. I thought, no, I'll do what she's been teaching me, which is to stop, really to stop trying to do anything and just come present. And she taught me how much I'd been interfering in my body. She'd kept saying to me, your mind is in your brain, bring it up, you know, what she wanted me to think from here. So I brought my mind up to my brain and out of trying to organize my body. And then I gave consent and just let my hand and myself move to the kettle. And something completely different happened. My hand encountered the kettle in a way I had never before experienced. It assessed for itself how much grip, how much muscles. My whole body lifted that kettle in a way I had never done before. I call it my kettle moment. And it was a complete game changer. I went back the next week and I lost no time in telling her what had happened. I didn't have to tell her, she knew. And I was in. And I've subsequently realized she seemed to have a habit of challenging people around about lesson 6, lesson 8. Anyone who's read Fiona Robb's book, it occurs between lesson 7 and lesson 9. She taught me how much I was interfering in my body, how much I wasn't in this place of quiet. But what I also got to understand was that this was actually how Alexander had discovered the technique. And this emerged slowly as I had more and more of these moments, both in the lesson and away. And because what she wanted to convey was that we've mostly learnt to organize our head, neck, back relationship and then move. So we set up our primary control and then we go into movement. Whereas what she wanted to get across was that for Alexander, it was the other way around, that he just came to this quiet place of non-reactivity, total non-reactivity, and then was very clear about what he intended to do, gave consent, and the movement organized itself. And then he discovered the head-neck-back relationship, the neck freed, the head led, the body then followed, and so on. The knees then joined in. And this, for me, was actually, once I started thinking about this, it excited my zoologist head, because after all, dogs don't go around saying, let my neck be free. They somehow know how to keep their necks free. They don't even have to know it. There are self-organizing mechanisms in the way dogs behave. And I started thinking, well, you know, how are humans designed to do this? And it comes out of this stopping. Just stop doing the wrong thing and the right thing will do itself. I mean, it's a truism within our technique, but how much do we really go to this level of letting this happen? And it takes very often a deeper level of quiet to let that completely revolutionary discovery in the nervous system, that the nervous system can do something completely different. So anyone feel a resonance with this? Anyone feel that this relates to something? Would anyone like to talk to this? Dana?
I have been lately really just standing there saying no and no and no over and over again, and teaching my pupils to say no and stopping, and about coming to quiet, and thinking of this very much lately. And I have another colleague, because she's not here, I can't speak to her name or say anything, but she and I do exchanges, and she does this all the time. And I think about it in terms of interpersonal relations. There's something magical about it.
Yes.
I remember from doing your work in the very first 10-week program, Penelope, during the lockdown.
Yes.
I was in your very, very first group.
You were.
And then the next 6-month group.
Mm.
And using something like, I used a stapler, but I have people doing it now with a light switch.
Brilliant.
Not to do. And it's, I think that we do this as a process of neck free, head forward and up, back lengthen and widen, as a way to move. but that's what happens when we move well.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
So it totally resonates with me. I think it's brilliant.
Well,
That's teaching, that bring us back to that, which
yes,
is the origin.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
Glad to hear you're still using it after 3 years.
I'm coming back to it more and more is what's happening.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I started taking lessons way back in the 80s, so early 80s
Hmm.
in training. So
Hijab,
yeah.
you had your hand up.
Yes. So can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Wonderful. So I had to get in and get out. But anyway, so I've been reading a lot. I've been taking lessons for the last 3 years, and I've been reading a lot. And one of the things that I keep on coming to is a little acronym that I read in one of the books. I can't remember which one, which was, you think of a task, you inhibit, you direct, and then you act. So TIDA kind of in my head. And that is, I think, you guys are probably much in an advanced level, but I'm kind of like trying to do that. Think of a task, but inhibit first, don't do it, and then direct, and then act. And whenever I can do it, it really makes a big difference.
Yes, absolutely. The magical thing we're doing here actually is leaving out the direct part of the process, which is, and there is no criticism in what I'm presenting to the way you're being taught and the way we all trained, because I think the technique had to go through that. Because I've now looked at many other methods, dyslexia, Steiner teaching, and attachment theory, Reiki. A lot of these methods, there was an immense founder who did all these discovery processes, but to pass it on, somebody had to formulate it. His students, his followers, then formulated it into a method that could be taught and passed on, and we had to go through that. And what we now have to do is go back to the beginning and ask, what was the man himself doing? Because otherwise the process fragments and weakens. And that, again, has happened in these other fields. One has to go back to what the founder was actually doing at a certain point and bring that life back in, because there's a discovery process to that just revitalizes, I would suggest. Anyone want to comment to that? So Hijab, what you're doing is fantastic. And then what we're doing here is taking it to another layer of quiet. Go on.
My question, one still question would be, so there is no direction at all. So you're not trying to send energy to your limbs, kind of saying, okay, I want to move this way. Isn't that direction kind of saying that?
We'll come to the direction part later on in the session.
Right.
So it's not the direction is gone for good, although I did it for years as a result of this. But I'll talk about direction later, because you're absolutely right. We do need to do that. Yes. But my primary experience with Miss Goldie was without the direction. It was just pure inhibition. And that, I think, was what was so interesting, because Alexander himself tells the tale, of course, in Use of the Self, when he's trying to find a different way of speaking. And at that point, he's freed his neck and discovered how to let his head go forward and up, or so he says. And still, whenever he goes to speak, he goes back into his old habits, and he plays this game of saying, I'll speak, no, I won't. I'll raise my arm, no, I won't. I'll do nothing. And not until his system completely stops reacting does he go ahead. And then something different happens. Now, I think that's not entirely the way he actually developed it right at the beginning, but that's another story, because I'm now researching the history intensively for a second book. And I think this, the Use of the Self story is actually one thread in a much bigger tapestry. But, park that for the moment. I think the original discoveries were actually around breathing, but probably came out of this pure inhibitory process, because otherwise you can't initially make a discovery without this pure inhibitory process, I think. Again, would anyone like to say anything to this? I've started this session by throwing out a huge curveball, who would anyone like to comment here? Anna, hello.
Hi, hello. First, I want to apologize because when I joined, my daughter's name was still on the account. So when you said Lisa, like, Someone else.
Made all the emojis.
Yes. She's 9.
Of course.
So,
Yes.
so I'm Anna.
Good.
Um,
Thank you.
I'm very happy to be here because I started reading your book. I'm not, through it yet. What I really liked about the beginning of this discussion is the way I understand it when you describe it, the process. It's what one of my professors used to say, there is the what and there is the how. So we are studying the how. And when we're talking about the, inhibiting, there is certain how that we're used to. And actually in my teaching, I just realized I tend to think, yes, there is this how that how about a different how?
Yes, yes. And those first teachers, they called it coming back to first principles, didn't they? So that all the time you're trying to, because the nervous system is it's relentless. The very next time I went for my kettle, of course, the nervous system is already trying to say, oh, well, that was good what happened last time, let's recreate it. And the challenge is then to come back to that quiet, to that unknown place all over again, coming back to first principles, where one just comes to the process, and so that, as you say, a different how can happen. Miss Goldie called it going into the unknown.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this? Don't be shy. Judith, have you played with this? I know you liked what I've done.
Yes, I think I actually call the work Finding Quiet Strength. That's my sort of phrase for the work. And I think it's sort of, I obviously love everybody's thoughts and inquiries and yours. And I think kind of what we're doing, and you say it so often, is sort of giving consent or giving permission for something to happen to us. And I think that's the tricky thing with teaching sensory awareness. And we all want to do it, don't we? And in a way, you have to allow it to be received. And quiet seems a very nice way to articulate that.
Yes, absolutely. Because, that's how nature does it. When the cat is stalking the mouse, it's not organizing its limbs, thinking I've got to step over that rock and I've got to, it's just using that receptivity, that receiving of the smell of the mouse, all the stimulation of the mouse, and that is organizing the cat's body for it. And there's that moment before the pounce where the cat is in a real state of quiet, but it's not a sleepy quiet, is it? It's a very alive quiet. And then the right moment comes and the cat pounces, and that's the end of the mouse. So and it's like potentially we need to be in that state every movement we make, which is of course a tall order. But shall we play our first game, and then we can I'll talk about the next stage, which is letting our next self organize. Because if you just move your head from side to side, just in a nice doing way, you're just moving it around, you'll notice that there's a few big muscles actually doing the job. You can sort of feel them really doing the work. One side switches on, then the other side switches on. And I did at one point count up how many muscles there were in the neck, and I can't remember what I found, whether it was 38 or 64. It was some vast number of muscles by the time you've counted all the tiny ones as well. And they all need to be involved. And if we do this, actually, most of them they're not really getting involved. So let's do something different. Let's just receive, like the cat, just seeing. And I'm looking at a shiny orange soft toy, and there's a sheen coming off the fabric that I'm receiving, and I'm receiving the color and the sheen and the light and shade of it, and the texture of it, and the form of it. Not particularly interested in the detail at this point, but the detail is coming in too. There's so much more to vision than just, oh yes, that's the Beanie Baby. So we're receiving all the information from it as if we've never seen it before. just allowing it to surprise us. And then I'm allowing the wood paneling behind it to surprise me too, letting myself see the grain of the wood as if I've never seen it before. Just receiving across the space. And to do this, we come present. And that toy, that piece of wood is one side of the space, but actually the other side of the space is me across the space. And we don't usually include ourselves in the frame. We normally just see out as if we're not there, as if we're looking out on the world. So now just include yourself in that dynamic. What you're looking at is one end and you're the other. And space might suddenly start to take on a volume that it didn't have before. And you might imagine a feather from your nose to what you're looking at. And a feather has all those little wisps along it. It's an extendable feather, of course, or it might be a paintbrush, or it might be a laser beam, whatever image works for you. But a feather has all these little wisps along it, and you can allow all those wisps to have space between them. They're not squeezing up, they're opening out. So we're opening up space as we're looking out. And then let that feather brush along. Let your eyes be caught by something to the right. I'm caught by my bookshelf. And my feather is brushing along the fabric of the bookshelf. And then it's brushing over, there's a little stack of old stat newses there. And so my feather is going bumpity, 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 bump along all of these side end of magazines. So I'm taking in, I'm receiving the information, but it's like I'm also feeling it. There's a kinesthetic sense to seeing here. Just letting your eye be caught by one thing and then the next and the next. Your feather is brushing along. The feather allows you to let both eyes and the attention all land at the same point. So we're really present to what we're seeing. And as your eye is moving along, your neck has actually turned. Are you even aware of it? It's probably happened so smoothly, you haven't even noticed it turning. Is there any sensation in your neck? Probably not. Once you've gone as far as you can to the right, just let your eye brush, that feather brush its way back again. The eyes just gliding from one thing to another, receiving across the space. And we're receiving that information all over again allowing what we're seeing to take us by surprise, to see color and texture that we didn't see first time round, or maybe we did see first time round, but again, it looks new. And then let your eyes go the other way. And the neck will turn because the eyes actually are the senses are actually what lead primary control. It's the eyes that organize the neck to free, the head to go forward and up and so on. And it can also be the ears, and I think for a dog it's also smell, and possibly also for us, who knows. The senses are organizing our movement. We don't have to be involved. It just looks after itself. And if one lets that nose feather come from the back of the head, just being aware of that feather now coming right through the optical pathway, right through to the primary visual cortex at the back, the whole visual cortex at the back, because of course the eyes are just the gatherers of the light. They're not really what's doing the seeing. It's the brain that sees. And if you think about actually allowing the brain to be what sees, the back of the brain at that, and you might notice that it brings in more volume, a sense of volume of the head, and even clearer awareness of yourself then. And might also bring in that sense of space even more. A sense that the whole room is present and you're present and what you're looking at is present. It's all present together in a wonderful expanded field of awareness, and your neck is just self-organizing as part of that. Anyone like to comment on how that is?
Wow. Is all I can say. I read the book, but I didn't, with your voice kind of walking me through this was like a completely different experience.
Brilliant.
Wow.
Yes. And you see, you didn't send any directions. Your neck just
No.
sorted itself out. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you.
That was amazing.
Yes. Anybody else like to share what happened for them?
I suppose for me, it was the space became more available to me within the room.
Yes.
My space within the room. I sit in this room every day and not always recognize the space or realize the space. That was lovely.
Yes. Yeah. And do you then expand a little bit in that expanding space? Yes. Yeah. So it has an immediate effect on our whole being, doesn't it? Yes. Thank you. Anyone else like to share?
You become very quiet, don't you? You can't, because
Yes.
I've done this before with you, but I haven't. I'd forgotten, and it gives you an incredible calmness. And yeah, like the gentleman was saying, I hadn't realised that there was a little doll there. I put it there quite a long time ago, and I hadn't noticed. And I've been working in here today. Yeah, and it's I can feel that my breathing's changed and everything is really, really slow.
Yes. Yes.
But I think you have to be into this position of stillness before you start. I teach yoga, and I was wanting to do this sort of idea of what's interfering with you when you take a leg up, and noticing that before you even think of moving a knee up. What's becoming involved before, but you have to be in this lovely stillness before you can even move on. And I think that was really nice, because it's brought me to stillness without thinking that was the job. It's quite a nice, yeah.
Lovely. Yes, come to quiet it's about calming the nervous system, isn't it? It's about coming into the autonomic nervous system, because the cat, to come back to the cat is stalking the mouse because she's hungry. And she's aware of her drive. She's aware of herself in that moment. There is an urge to stalk the mouse, or she might simply have an urge to play, because sometimes cats stalk when they're not hungry, and then they let the mouse go. But whichever way, there's an urge at this internal interoception is the posh word that creates the movement. And if we're busy rushing around, we're not actually listening to ourselves, we're not with ourselves. So we have to come back to ourselves, because only when we come back to ourselves can we then listen to what really needs to happen. Can we then allow something to happen? The nervous system has to come to this quiet place. And the eyes are actually one of the most reactive parts of the body, if not the most reactive. And lateral eye movements is actually the quickest way of bringing the system to quiet. So this isn't just a random thing we did, moving the eyes. It's quite deliberate, moving the eyes slowly. If I have a pupil who comes in and they just want to tell me about something that happened over and over and over again, how sometimes they tell the story and then they tell it again. And I start saying, can you tell me what's in front of you? Can you tell me, and they just keep talking. Can you tell me what's in front of you? And eventually they agree to tell me what's in front of them. And something starts to shift. And then we go into this eye work, and they start to calm down, and then they come present, and then we can do something meaningful. So I actually use this at the start of lessons almost always, just to bring the person present. It's a very, very powerful way. And I don't know whether your yoga people would be receptive to that, Marilyn, but you might try it. So anyone else like to comment here? Attila, you look like you're enjoying it.
Yes, I do, because I'm a bit shy because of the recording, so I would like to stay humble and polite. But it's good, let's put it that way, it's good to hear. So I've been teaching for 9 years, and it's good to hear those aspects of work being reinforced, because I started experimenting with things. For example, when COVID hit, how to teach online without touch, and I started implementing things and started looking for things like that, this process. So it's kind of revelation that, oh, it's so good to hear, because it can be only me, but sometimes I look for other professional colleagues' improvement, that it has a place in our in our field of work.
Yes.
So it's good to tap into that and just.
Yes, COVID and online work set a good old division in the technique, didn't it?
Yeah.
But it also opened up the path for a lot of discoveries, I think.
Yes.
So good for you for having the courage to follow your path. Yeah. Anyone else like to comment here?
I like to say a couple of things. What I had immediately in my mind was connectedness, because by being not present, we disconnect from the world, from people, and this connectedness to the space, to everything, it really, really expands you. So that's very, and what you mentioned about teachers making discoveries with online work, I think it's really at the heart of Alexander technique that you're really open to change. Because at the very beginning, I heard people say, well, but how can you achieve anything without touch? It's just not, it's just some scam, it's just not, but it's not. You can really give, you can go to the core of the technique, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's Goldie was very keen to say it's about life, it's about living. So was Erica Whitaker when I talked to her. And there were two sides to Goldie's work, and this come to quiet side is very much what people know her for, what most people have written about. But to me, there was another side to that, which is the coming to quiet was needed so that she could actually work on me very strongly and bring about something very different in my body without me interfering. And she was doing moves on me that I'd never met with anyone else. She was twisting my elbows round in a way that brought my shoulder into somewhere really weird. And then she would twist my arm back in the other way. It was like, what is going on here? And she was tapping me in my body. She didn't work very much around the head and neck. She worked an awful lot around my hips and around my middle. And I didn't understand that. But what I was aware of is that I would then go away from the lesson and catch the train back to there and then ride my bicycle back up the hill. And suddenly I could go up that hill in third gear because I got it back and my legs were connected. And that was new because I was always not very physically strong. And she would tell me, your back is not strong enough to be a teacher. You'll never make a teacher unless your back comes strong. And she said about making my back strong. And the interesting thing was that when I first joined Misha's training, that McDonald, in and out of the chair, I put on half a stone of muscle, 7 pounds of muscle. That's 3.5 kilos for those in the first term. And it quite clearly went on my back. So I thought I'd got a strong back. And when I went to Goldie, she picked up very quickly that strong back was actually a little bit of fixing, and she collapsed it. And I was back in a slump for the first time in years. And it was horrible. There I was trying to teach and I couldn't sit up. And she was slowly rebuilding me, but she was rebuilding me from the inside, from the core. And when after about 6 months, suddenly something really connected. And then she set about connecting my legs, connecting my arms. And she built a strength and a connectivity in me that I'd never before had in my life. When I stopped my lessons with her, I worked with her for 4 years, and by then I was in Sheffield, away from London. I'd got a small child. It was very difficult to get to her. And I started to ask, what have I got here? What was so different? And I went to it put me on a 30-year quest. I went back to John Hunter. He taught me Alexander's very first breathing work, actually. He introduced me to Erica Whitaker. I worked with her. I also was already working with natural vision technique with Bates. I later went to Peter Grunwald and worked more with the eyes and the link with that. Bob Britton introduced me to functional anatomy, and I did some craniosacral therapy that introduced me to the world of tensegrity, the ideas of tensegrity, and to Meyer's anatomy trains, to myofascial lines. And I also worked with Philip Shepherd on embodiment. So there were lots of different paths as well as, but the next big development for me was that we moved to Ireland in 2004, and I fell very, very ill. And I was pretty well bedridden for 1.25 years, and I had very little strength. There was a lot of slow coming back after that illness. It was a big chronic fatigue episode, the last one. And when I was starting to regain my strength again, I started to work with a yoga teacher, and I started some swimming. And I kept working with this come to quiet discovery process that Goldie had been working with me with, and thinking, when does the strength come back? Because her work brought me strength. How do I bring in the strength? And it wasn't appearing. And I began to think, I'm missing something here. There's a key here I've not got. And it was after the Limerick Congress in 2016. Rosa Luisa introduced me to Jando Masuero, if anyone knows his work, of the initial Alexander technique, because he also had been asking questions of how did Alexander develop the technique. And he was very interested in biomechanics and Alexander's conscious reasoning processes. So he was coming from very much the other end of it than I was. And he also had followed up on the Delsart thing. Alexander advertised himself as a teacher of Delsart back in 1902. And he'd come to the conclusion that Alexander did a series of pulls on himself that enabled him, that he directed through constructive conscious control. And actually, if you read Alexander's writing, the word pulls actually, and the first teachers, they also talk about pulls up off the ankle, the head pulling up off the spine. There's pulls occur all over the place if you look for it. So what was that about? So I took a lesson with Jando, and it was online because he only works online. And he was getting me to think these directions, and I was giving these really strong pulls to my elbow. And my head was saying, this is not Alexander technique. This is far too doing. This is wrong. I should just walk away from this. And he was waiting for me to walk away, because a lot of senior teachers walked away from him in their first lesson for precisely those reasons. But I suddenly realized that he was bringing about for me exactly what Miss Goldie had been doing. The biomechanics was the same, and the results was the same. And I thought, wow, this is what I'm missing. And I took 20 lessons with him, and really filled in that missing piece. How to bring about for myself what Miss Goldie had brought about for me. And I think it's an incredibly valuable piece of the jigsaw. And Jando has accumulated the evidence that this is the very different biomechanical balance that Alexander himself was using. Whether he was doing it exactly as Jando says, I don't actually think he was. But in essence, I think he's really onto something, and it was the missing piece. So because it engages, it allows us to do that other side of the work that as humans we need to do, and undo our deep tension patterns. Because now we just got all our neck muscles working just by using our eyes. But if we tried to get our whole backs working, we probably noticed that all sorts of areas of the back were actually rather offline, that these muscles weren't working or these muscles weren't working. And the chances of engaging all the back muscles are probably rather small. And certainly our pupils, most of their muscles are switched down. They're just, there's one estimate I've heard that people are actually only using 10% of their muscles. We can only get that discovery process going with muscles that are available to the nervous system. And what these strong pulls are doing is bringing the balance back into the myofascial lines This is what I think they're doing. They're bringing the balance back into the myofascial lines so that all the muscles come back into an expanded, elastic, alive place where they are then available to the central nervous system and can be recruited into our movement patterns. So it's not incompatible with, to start with, I thought these are two very different techniques. There's the Miss Goldie work and the Jando work, and how do they fit together? But this is how I now see it, that we have to wake them up, and then we can recruit them, and then we can let something different happen by itself. So anyone like to speak to this? Does this resonate with anyone? This very different. Attila, again, do you want to say anything? You're welcome to say anything, you know.
I'm making notes and reminders for myself, like waking up the muscles, and I don't know how to formulate my thoughts, but I feel inspired. That's the point. I have lots of ideas and lots of because again, most of the time my biggest concern is how to implement tools and stay courageous and brave enough to implement tools and still calling it Alexander technique authentically, you know.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
implementing or understanding the polyvagal theory, which I'm really into nowadays, you know, the nervous system and things like that.
Yes.
So yeah, I feel this inspiration.
Lovely, thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this? Andre, yes, please. And then Hisham.
Yes, coming from the orthodoxy, as you know me, question is that orthodoxy doesn't speak about muscles at all and anatomy. So you are suggesting here that we learn a lot of anatomy and then implement the work of the muscles, that we waken them up. Now, how to now
Reconcile that.
The number of muscles, as you know, and there's no end to it. How can we do it and
yes,
and all these muscles which you are suggesting we have?
Yes. So the answer is, of course, as you say, I mean, depending on how you count them, we have anything up to 800 muscles, and we cannot organize them consciously. What we need to do, though, is ensure that they're all available. And so I do a lot of anatomy play to locate these muscles again, but even the anatomy play needs to be done from this place of quiet, this place of open expansion, because then it's what we're looking for is to get the nervous system to discover, oh yeah, there's the back of the arm. I knew the front of the arm. There's the back of the arm. There's my psoas. And then we forget about that and think those overall directions, and one can think along a whole myofascial line. Erica Whittock had a lovely line that she told to a teacher who was a trainee who took lessons with her weekly right back in the 80s in Australia, because she was saying everything I do is in service of freeing the neck. And the trainee asked, you know, what do you mean by the neck? And she said, you know, do you just mean the head-neck balance? And she said, oh no, I mean in service of the neck, freeing my neck all the way down to my toes. Because all those myofascial lines, they all start in the feet and they all come right through into the head. And we want to know that every muscle along that length is activated, because then the whole thing is activated when they all activate. So we're not working, although we might work with a muscle group for a short while, it's not in order to over-focus on a muscle. It's absolutely not. It's in order to wake it up so that it can join in with the integrative patterns. Now, functional anatomy wasn't understood back in Alexander's day. I think they had a sort of vague inkling that it was there, but nobody really had defined it in the way that Myers has really brought it center stage. that muscles are working in these groups. And what one is activating is the whole body pattern of it. And I think that's very much what, as Alexander teaches, more than anybody else, we are doing. We are discovering how to integrate the whole thing. But you can only get your neck free and your head forward and up and your back lengthening and widening if all your back muscles are available, and if your hip muscles are available, and if your calf muscles are available, and your shin muscles, and all the deep muscles. And so often, most of them are switched down to different degrees. Does that make sense, Andre? So,
yeah, I want to throw here another thing which may play a role is the fascia. And
absolutely. And when I say muscles, we're talking about the myofascia, because muscles don't operate alone. As you say, they operate in as part of the fascia. The proper word is not muscle chain, it's myofascial chains. And then the energy's flowing along that as well. So there's more even than muscles and fascia. As Hijab said earlier, we're directing energy along those lines. So, you know, Myers has actually pointed out that the acupuncture lines actually pretty well follow the myofascial line. So, you know, who knows what else we're using? I think there's more to that. And you're right. So it's not just muscles. We're not directing muscles. We're directing in the end limbs, but we're directing along groups. Yeah. Thank you. Now, somebody else was going to speak there, and I lost who it was.
It was me.
It was you. Hello, Hesham.
Hey. Yeah, so when I did the eye exercise, I noticed that my thoughts were also a big part of the process, trying to interfere, telling me the cell phone zoom is too low, the chair is too high, and other thoughts were coming in. And when you mentioned how the eyes help us to be present and quiet the rest of the mind, it reminded me of the EMDR therapy that's used for PTSD. And in my reading about that, there was, I think, was it Steve Porges or Levine who had come up with the theory initially. But they had been working with someone, and apparently there is a connection between the position of the eyes and some subconscious protective mechanism that defends a person against the trauma. And when the eyes may go in a certain position, it may just kind of reactivate that system. And they were using it to bring it out and to kind of process it. And so this brings into mind the idea of our conscious thoughts and our subconscious mind and how they may interact with our physicality. So a lot of exciting things that need to be further investigated.
That interaction between the conscious and the subconscious is absolutely the interface that we're working with Alexander Technique. That, you know, the process we were describing earlier, the discovery process, what we're allowing there is the subconscious organizing mechanisms to come into play that are organized from the brainstem. And the eyes actually do so much. There's a direct link from the eyes to the brainstem. Organizing movement. The eyes are a lot about organizing movement, but they also have all sorts of other functions. These, as you say, these protective functions. So there's a lot going on there. But I think one of the things we're doing with the technique is learning to come conscious of our unconscious processes, in a sense, to allow them to operate away, but we're consciously invoking them. We're consciously, in a sense, we're hacking the nervous system. We're learning how to turn it back on and get it working again through conscious processes. We're learning to tap the unconscious, just like we became aware of spatial sense earlier. Spatial sense normally operates completely unconsciously, and yet we brought it conscious. And I think that's what we're doing with a lot of our work. And Goldie didn't, you see, the way Alexander describes it in his books is, certainly the very early books, is you have a bad habit that you're unconscious of, you come conscious of it, you allow the process of lessons to change it, you get a new habit, and then you can go unconscious again. And that wasn't how Goldie saw it at all. She wanted one to stay conscious. She wanted us to be conscious all the time, because only when we're conscious do we have this tone, do we have this presence, do we have the ability to keep allowing something different to happen. And that's where we come fully to life. And we can actually, at that point, I think, see off traumas if we, if we've got to that place. Anyone want to comment on that? Attila, you're nodding, and Solvik as well. Solvik, do you want to speak?
No, kind of not. I have to accept that I have been falling asleep. I've been out for 12 hours on the whole day.
Oh, bless. Yes. Not to worry.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. It's okay. It's okay. Yes. I'm glad you're here. And
I may listen to it later. You said you would send us the recording.
Yes.
Yeah, and then I will be on.
Yes. That's fine. You recline. Yes. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Dana.
Hi, I was actually wanting to ask you to speak more about the Bates method and how that interacts with Alexander technique. I took Bates class when I was studying theater when I was 20, way before, it was before I studied Alexander technique at all. And I really am very interested in how the use of the eyes coordinates movement, which I see that it does, and also how our eye habits can also be improved.
Well, I think Bates is Alexander work for the eyes, actually. And you really can't separate the two. I don't think you can satisfactorily teach Bates without teaching Alexander. And neither do I think can you satisfactorily teach Alexander without actually involving the eyes, because it is such a central part. And Alexander was using his eyes all the time. And my first teacher, she could be behind me, and if I looked down, she would say, "You're looking down, look up." And I would think, how does she know? She was behind me. So, I think vision is a sort of an implicit part of our work, but it hasn't been made explicit. And that's coming in much more. I think, Peter Grumbold's done a great work there, and also Bernadette, I've forgotten her second name in this moment, has been involved in several training courses, bringing the vision work more into the field. So it's crucial.
I agree, because I'm always asking, I'm saying, see something, not just glaze over. People, they try to glaze over and they're not seeing. In other words, perception is different than just the eyes looking out there.
Yes.
Because we're always on alert for danger unconsciously. So something will trigger and the eyes will catch it unconsciously. But people glaze over, and so I'm always dealing with, where are you looking? If you're seeing the ceiling, you're pulling your head, it's a clue that you're pulling your head back, that they don't feel. So I'm working, and I had an imbalance in my eyes as a child, and I had eye exercises, and then I did Bates work because I was on theater and my eye was wandering. And so I'm really interested to come back to this more.
It's like I say, it coordinates movement, but it's more than that. It actually is about presence. So just for the moment, everybody just switch their eyes off. Just sort of stop really seeing, and notice what happens to the tone of the body. And now come back, actually allow yourself to come back to what we were doing earlier, seeing in this receiving way, where you've got, you at one side, your nose feather, what you're seeing is the other side. And you've come present, your eyes have come alive again, and hopefully you can just let them just gently wander. But what's happened to your whole body? Anyone like to comment on, has anyone noticed a change in their whole body when they
becomes awake?
Becomes awake. Thank you.
Yes,
absolutely. So if we switch the eyes off, and most people are going around, as you say, not seeing, as one knows when people don't get out of your way when you're on a pavement now, or the driver in front doesn't notice that you're flashing your lights at them. It's the body is switched down, and this is why coming present, coming to this quiet place isn't a sleepy place where we shut off. It's a place where we come alive and present. And in that presence, we come toned. So let's play another game to do with tone, because I also said I'd play a game around strength and tone. So if everyone would actually like to stand up. And what I want you to do to start with is just think of that sort of Alexander lesson, that's Alexander instruction that says just released into movement. So we're just going to release our arms into lifting up and release them down again. And you might notice that if you just release them down again, actually the body actually loses tone. So you're just releasing up and releasing down. And now bring your arm back up again in that sort of, again, release it to come up and press on a wall or a desk or something and just see, just give it, put a bit of force into it and see the quality of that force and the strength you can generate and where you feel that it happens. Okay. And now let's do that process again. But this time I want you to talk you through it, that I want you to come back to your eyes, because we always start with this coming present and coming alive. And from that place of you're in relationship to your room or to what you're looking at. And you're also, there's a spatial relationship to that. And then there's also a spatial relationship to your hand. So you can do what Miss Goldie said. You can think about send a direction to your hand from your head. You don't have to go down there. You can just keep looking out and say to my hand, just let some energy flow down the arm to the hand and down to the floor. So you're going to flow some energy down the arm, flow a direction down the arm, sending the fingers to the floor. And if you keep sending those fingers to the floor and keep sending them away, you might find there's a point where the arm just rises up. And you might find your hands will, if you just let your hand come to here, your hands will need to straighten. Letting your hands straighten, that's it. And you might notice the arm comes quite light. And now keeping that presence, keeping that tone in the arm, you're taking exactly the same path. You're still directing through the arms all the way down. And now all the way up again, except this time just come halfway up and put your hand back on whatever surface you were pressing on before. And again, just give a press, just direct that energy through the arm and give a press and see what you notice when you press. What's the quality of the force you're putting through? What's the force you can generate? Now, is it different to the first time round? What's happened? Anyone like to comment?
It's more a flow of energy than just pure muscle, I think.
Lovely. Yes, yes, yes. And is it just in the arm or is there more happening in the body?
It's all over the body. You can almost feel it transfer even to the other side. Kind of like the energizing kind of flow.
Yes. So everything wakes up and gets involved in that push. Beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else like to comment? Francis? Oh, Francis has disappeared.
Unmute myself. There we are. I was just, I'm afraid, going to have to leave. So sorry. Thank you very much. It's been a really interesting time. But
lovely.
I've got to go now. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Do tune into the end of the recording.
I'll watch the recording. Yeah. Thank
you. Yes. Bye-bye. Anyone else like to comment? What's the difference? Did you notice a difference between the first and the second time?
I realized the second time the energy was more coming from my back, I guess. It was like the first time I was really pushing with my fingertips and with the front of my arm. And the second time was really, I felt like, yeah, how my back muscles engaged.
Yes. Yes, nice. And then something can come more, the whole of you is involved. And yes, and it's a smoother push, isn't it? Yeah. Lovely. Thank you. That's super. So this is, I think, what we're after also with the pulls, that we do, which I won't go into today, but we're actually directing energy along the myofascial lines. And although we're directing it along specific muscle lines, actually the whole body is activated. If we get it right, the whole body is activated. Anyone else like to comment on this?
So if I wanted to make a rule for myself that in order to do it the easy way, I simply need to conclude, I need to start with the fingertips. Now, once I then touch the wall, I continue with the pressure I am putting on the wall, and somehow the whole body is present in that touch, including my actually legs and feet. I am very conscious that my legs connect with the ground, so it grounds me as well.
Yes.
So, what I am learning here, as far as just that the movement needs to start with the fingertips.
Well, it needs to start with a relationship of direction. I would put it more specifically. The relationship we had just now was the head and the fingertips, but it could be the head and the elbow. It could be the head and the foot. It could be the head and the knee. It could be the head and the lower back. It could be, there's always a dynamic relationship in it. And I think that's the point. Judith, you want to say something?
I think that's what classically, because I loved it, and Andres said that word earlier, that's what we might call opposition. Yes. But we're calling in the forces, aren't we, like resistance and momentum and leverage and all those sort of physics forces that are sort of being employed within the embodiment through opposition. But the resistance, I think, gives us, it wakes that up in us, that opposition. Perhaps that's a thought.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because, you know, the tensegrity model is very self-contained, and there's one side of Alexander work that is very self-contained and it's not interested in resistance, it's just making it easy. But biomechanics is interested in forces on the body and doing things more dynamically. And I think that's what we're bringing in here. And we need both sides.
Yeah. And then we're also including the sort of neuroception or interoception of the spatial awareness and the autonomic system. So the conversations are sort of happening throughout the inner world, the outer structure, and the world around us. It's so beautiful, isn't it? Aren't we lucky?
Aren't we just? And this is why I called the book The 12 Fundamentals, because we've got the fundamentals of structure, which includes the biomechanics and the tensegrity aspects and also spirals. And when you put those together, you get a body that will just move. But nobody will move if it doesn't have a reason to move. So then you've got your perception, and you've got your external perception, your vision, your smell, and so on. You've also got your proprioception, which of course we need in order to be able to move. And you've also got this interoception, the drive that is going to take us somewhere. And when you put those together, I think you get this expanded field of awareness, again, which is what we need in order to have the real metrics within which to move, so we can move in a coordinated way. And then, even that's not enough, you've got the third block of fundamentals, which is your thinking and consciousness. We need, as we said earlier, to have this place of calm, because otherwise we're not really with ourselves and we'll just do things in a habitual way. We need to be aware of where we're thinking from. If we're over-involved with the body, we get in our own way. And we also need very, very conscious thinking. And when you put those together, then you can make a conscious choice to give consent and let the whole thing come together. And then you get this movement like my kettle moment or cat pouncing on the mouse, or whatever, and the whole thing comes together. And I don't think that other therapies have grasped this totality of what it takes to make an integrated movement. I think this is what we have got potentially in our work. And this is why, again, what you're doing, Attila, is Alexander work. This is, if we're bringing all this in an integrated way, it is Alexander technique. I think this is what Alexander was doing, even though he didn't name some of these aspects, you know, because he, he only had one lifetime. You know, I think there's so much that he never got round to naming that he was actually using. So let me talk about the my book, which is this, you know, it's huge, and it's got an awful lot in it. There's 200 explorations, and so we formed the book study club to help people work through it. And there's a new group forming at the moment that begins again on October the 9th. Everybody, each group starts at the beginning, works through together, because it's great to get together and work through it with support. We get together every 2 weeks, and this group's going to be on a Monday afternoon at 2 o'clock, whatever that is in your part of the world. So in America, that's 9 in the morning. And in Central Europe, it's 3 in the afternoon. And all sessions are recorded, so you can come on that, you can actually come to the session or not. And some people I never see, some people come to every session, some people come when they can, and so on. And everybody works with a study buddy, so that you're not just going through the exercises, the explorations for yourself, and we go through them in the sessions as well, but also you have the opportunity to take another teacher through them, or a fellow trainee or whatever, and they actually and they take you through it. So you learn to verbalize it, because so many of us, we did hands-on trainings, and we really learned to sort of feel what was going on with our hands. Whereas on Alexander's first training course, he very much encouraged people to be able to look. He stood back. He didn't feel what was going on with his hands. He stood back and looked. And then he knew where to put his hands. He knew what to do. And we're taking it one step further than that. We're learning to really wake up our observation. And then if we're working online, it is such a good discipline online, because you haven't got your hands, and you have to then work out what you want the pupil to direct or to think in order to change what you're seeing. And you have to then work out the words to say in order to bring about that change. And then you have to watch what happens. And then you have to get the pupil to give you feedback, which is another thing that wasn't encouraged in the early days, because the assumption was, I think quite wrongly, that pupils have always got it wrong because of faulty sensory perception. And I think, you know, we're missing a huge part if we don't get pupils verbalizing. And when you ask pupils, okay, how was that? You know, you free their necks and you say, how was that? And they say, yeah, okay, tell me a bit more. Yeah, that was nice. Yes, so tell me more. What's nice about it? And eventually they say, oh yes, my neck feels freer. Right, good, absolutely. Now, how did you bring that about? Oh, well, I used my eyes. How did you use it? And when you get the pupil verbalizing, you really speed their process, because their nervous system wakes up to what's happened, to what is, and sometimes, of course, what they say is clearly faulty sensory perception, and that's okay too. That's part of the process. But learning to get this verbal process going means that when you then work with people in the room, you can choose how much you put your hands and how much you don't. Marjorie Barlow writes in her book, The Examined Life, that most people are now using their hands too much. And various people are now saying we've become over-reliant on feeling it out with our hands, and we're not actually engaging our pupils enough. And from my own experience, my pupils are more excited about the work. They always used to enjoy the work, but now they're getting to go away at the end of every lesson with something they can bring about for themselves. And there's an excitement there and an empowerment there that I never really quite saw in the early days. So anyone like to speak to that, this whole idea of working through this together in a group, and Does this sound like an appealing process? Would anyone like to ask questions? Hi, Jap.
So my question would be, this is a different approach to Alexander technique, because all of like the exploration I've done so far, which has only been a few years, but it seemed like more like it's one-to-one. You have to do it, with a teacher and a pupil, and and not this is between two students now. It's a very different idea. It sounds exciting, but it seems very different to what I know about it.
Sure. And we were always told, of course, that we couldn't work on our own because of faulty sensory perception.
Right.
But you all have experienced two changes happen this time, which you brought about yourself, firstly by using your eyes, and secondly by directing to your hands, and something different happened. The key is in the expanded field of awareness. I think it's the expanded field of awareness that allows us to step out of faulty sensory perception and stop interfering and allow ourselves to go into the unknown. Now, Alexander never defined that. Frank Pierce-Jones did, but nobody took any notice. I think Irene Tasker did, but nobody took any notice. So it never went mainstream. And, Alexander was very frustrated because people couldn't get out of their own way. And I think it's one of the things that's happened subsequently is that we have learned that we can get out of our own way, we can direct our own process. And now we've also got a certain amount of nervous system models to back that up, and the functional anatomy to back that up of what we're doing. And I think there is a potential here that we're really only just beginning to tap. And it does allow for more group work and also things, things can happen faster because the pupil is able to take it away and work on them themselves. So it is different. And of course, there's nothing wrong with the traditional approach. And there will be people who will continue to want to use that way. And that's fine. It's a matter of choices as to what we use. And some people, learn my work and then they just use it to empower their work and they carry on teaching quietly with hands and still don't involve the pupil. It's fine. It's people's choice how they use this work. But I think it does build confidence in our work, confidence in what we are doing, because as a profession, we're not always the most confident. Attila.
Yeah, speaking of confidence, there's a question coming back to me for many years. And it's related to the speed of the action and the movement. So when I have the time, I speak for myself and for my pupils as well. When I have the chance to slow down the movement, the activity, like, for example, practicing on the instrument, that's fine. But what about playing football or handball when I actually, not only that I perceive that I don't have the time, but it's actually I don't have the time to slowing down the ball approaching me, and coming back to me, and it's almost like I don't have this time for self-regulate. I won't use the word directing, but self-regulate. So, for example, when I feel stuck, so how? Just one another segment to it or explanation. So I've been experimenting on my own nervous system. Either I go coming from dysregulation and being stuck in old stuff. Either I go, shut down, like losing the tone, or I'm being in hyperactive state, especially when playing in groups, for example.
Yes.
So when I'm engaging in a handball game or something like that, I get stiff because I don't have the usual tools as an Alexander teacher to slow down, give myself time. So I collect answers and approaches how to deal with that, other than slowly, indirectly, letting my practice or explorations sink into my activity. So I wonder what your thoughts about that.
I think that's a wonderful question, and it is something we're absolutely addressing as we work together. I think it is about building the vagal tone, actually, to use this coming to quiet as the baseline all the time, more and more and more, so that we do build that vagal tone. And then we can keep that vagal tone when we go into a more activated state. I know exactly what you're talking about, because in the years where I had ME, I would go from 0 to 100 within the slightest thing would overactivate my system, and I'd be gone. And one of the ways of thinking about it is, we can go slow in order to find ourselves, but we actually want to keep the slow when we're going fast outside. We can go in a slow and out a slow. And if we're in a really active state, we might even be going out a slow, but we're still in like this on the inside, we're still in a fast. So we want to be able to stay in a slow as we're going out a fast. And certainly for myself, that's come over the years. The more that I have stayed with this, this baseline state, keep coming back to this place of quiet, keep coming back. And I think also it's a bit like, as a musician, you learn to play the C scale very slowly on your violin or your piano or whatever. And then as you build confidence in that, as the nervous system relaxes into that and feels calmer with that, one day you can and you can just give consent and let it happen. And one day you can, just dive up in that football game or whatever and bung and you suddenly realize you stayed present through the whole process. And that's very much what we're working towards. But it is a matter of building this vagal tone. So we're very much building resilience through this process, not just by the coming to quiet, but also actually through the pulls. And an extraordinary tale was told to me by one of the teachers who's been in one of the book study clubs, who went through an absolutely massive neck operation that she had to go through, where they were really deep into the neck. And when she woke up, she said she just wanted to die. It was just so painful and so overwhelming. And to keep herself calm, she was using the pulls to keep her body in an expanded state, because of course the pain was wanting to contract her, and she just was lying there in bed. And I expected her to say she was looking at the ceiling and breathing, but no, she was using the pulls to keep herself in a calm place. So again, even that can be part of the picture, that we keep in this expanded place where the body stays elastic, and that actually then allows the breathing and allows the present calm. So it's all interrelated. Yeah. So just to talk a bit more about the club, I keep the price very low. It's €25 a month, and there's no upfront commitment. So it is just €25 a month, which I hope is affordable to most people. And if anyone really can't afford 25, then they can actually pay 20 as a helping hand price. And we've discovered it takes about 1.5 years to go through the whole book. This will be the 7th group that we're taking through. Three groups have finished at this point. And it takes time, because we really do allow each group to take their time of assimilating each part before we move on. And those of you who've seen my book will know it builds progressively. So we start with this coming to quiet, and then we do a lot with the eyes, and then we add the breathing. So we really know how to access the place of quiet and allow the body to move, and then we go into the pulls work. And all the time we're bringing that the next chapter is building on the previous chapter. So your knowledge, your self-work, your integration of the work, your confidence in the work is building as we go. And by the time people actually go through the whole thing, they are looking so different. And people tell me, pains they've had for years are gone, and problems, twists in the spine or whatever, have actually untwisted or are in the process of untwisting. Bunions are disappearing. They've got more stability. They've got more mobility. They can squat again. We've seen older women with long-term knee problems get back into squat again. Elasticity comes back, and they feel much more confident in their teaching. They're much more engaging with their pupils. It can be a very exciting process. So again, would anyone like to ask questions? Because I do hope that some of you will jump in there and give it a go. And like I say, if it doesn't work out, or if family circumstances change and things. Anna. You're muted.
I thought I did. How do we choose the partner to work together?
Well, if you know somebody who's in the group that you want to work with, you can specify, I want to work with so-and-so. And some people join up with a friend for that reason, and that they say, well, I'm going to work with my friend. And otherwise, we find people, in the first session, we see if we can pair people up, partly on where they are in the world and interest and who likes the look of who and so on. And then take it from there and see if that partnership works. And sometimes people actually need to shift, and then we put a call out and people shift partners, and people find the person they're right with. Some people work in a little group, groups of 3 sometimes, and it's lovely. And people who are pupils, we put them as a practice with a practice teacher, so that somebody who wants somebody who to play with the teaching of it in a safe situation, it's great to work with one of the practice pupils in the group. And because we don't ask pupils to take a leading role in this way unless they want to, in which case that's fine too. Particularly people who are already therapists in another medium sometimes want to take on a teaching role in that way.
And how long is the class, the meeting?
Class? Yes, each class itself is 90 minutes. So it's 2 o'clock to 3:30. And I forget where you are in the world, Anna.
I'm in Boston.
In Boston, so. That's right. So it's 9 o'clock in the morning for you. Mm-hmm. Yes, because that's EST, isn't it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yes, 9 till 10:30. Can you do a Monday?
Yeah, I think so. All my students are on Tuesday. Nobody wants Monday, so
well, there you go. The slot's waiting for you. Yes. Oh, that would be marvelous. Yes. Anyone else like to ask questions about this? And in the sessions as well, people go through the work on their own first, and then they get together with their study buddy. And people tell me they work for an hour a week with their study buddy. Some people work weekly, some groups work fortnightly. People find their own rhythm. You know, I put up a suggestion, but people actually find their own ways of working with it. And then we get back together and people are able to ask questions and share difficulties. And particularly if there's good to see you, Dana. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Judith, as well. And we can also talk through any specifics, like if somebody's got a scoliosis and they're wondering how to balance things up or whatever, or a foot imbalance or whatever, we talk it through, and everybody, it's great learning for everybody when people bring specific issues as well, or issues with a pupil. They're not quite sure how to deal with this pupil or that pupil. So it's a real melting pot of discoveries and questions and explorations together. Iris, hello.
Yes, hello. For me, it's unfortunately not possible to join, but you mentioned the possibility that you can send us the records, and then I could work on it. How would it be possible that I can work with somebody when I'm not within the group? I may say.
Yes, and there's actually a lot of people who do that. There's a lot of people who can't make it on Mondays at that time, and so we sort of a buddy for them anyway. And then you just work from the recordings, and you can email me questions, or you can and I can either email you back directly, or if your buddy comes to the group, we can work it through in the group if there's questions and difficulties. And say there's a lot of people working behind the scenes. Also people who are not so confident in English. They find it easier, the Koreans in the group, for instance, they find it much easier to work from the recording, because then they can bring up Google Translate on the recording, and as well as get around time zone difficulties. And dyslexics also, there's a few dyslexics in the group who actually are working very much at their own speed, because, you know, their brains work in different ways. And there's some who keep up to speed, but some who really like to take it a lot slower so that they can take the reading at their own pace. So it's a very flexible process. And if people are going slower, once the whole group has finished, then all the recordings are available to the whole group. And the backup material as well is also available for lifetime. So there's no demands to finish the whole process within the time frame of the group. And some people will be working at it for a while yet. Good to see you, Billy. Do you want to ask any questions before you go or make any comments? Good. Thank you.
Not for now, but thank you very, very much for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Yes. So how does that sound, Aris? Does that sound a possible process? Yes. Lovely. Anyone else like to ask questions? I'm sorry, we've overrun a bit here. So I will be sending out the recording to everybody. And I'll also send out the link to the book study club so that you can take a bit more look at the details of it. And I'm really hoping that some of you will sign up because you're a great group and I'd love to work with you more. And I'll also send out a link for where to buy the book if you haven't got a copy and you're inspired to get a copy. The German edition should be out in October at last. We've been waiting for it a long time, so I'm hoping it will be out in October. So if people who are German also want to use the German edition, that will be coming along soon, I hope. So Solveig, do you want to comment at all? You're sitting up.
Yeah, I'm sitting up. I'm tempted, but I'm a little bit uncertain about how much time I can invest. I have many balls in the air.
Yes.
So,
yes.
But it's absolutely very tempting, and I think, yeah.
Yes, I mean, you need a couple of hours a week, but that's all. And then, of course, one's incorporating it in life, and that's always the beauty of the Alexander, isn't it? That once you've got to go at something, then you can play with it while you're on, waiting in the queue at the shop.
Yes, I know. Yeah, yes, and I do that. I do that. I integrate it in my daily way of moving and being.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think you can put into it as little or more as you want, as long as you've done the basic reading and found time to watch the seminar and play. Not everybody wants to work with a study buddy. It's good if one can, but other people just play with it with their pupils or with their husband or whatever works for them.
But I probably would have to have study buddy. But because there's so much competition between all the things I have to read, I have to read so many other things as well. But I like reading, but it's yeah.
The study, if one can do the study buddy, it's a very valuable part of it, and people have built amazing friendships around the world as well with it. I know that some people are still in touch with their study buddies three years later. Some of the ones from the course Dana mentioned, the very first course back when COVID first broke. Yeah. Yes, thank you. I'm hoping you will. Anyone else think this is a good idea? Attila, are you thinking about it, Royston? That's
Yes, I'm thinking about it. I just would like to be careful with my commitments because I have a tendency to overcommit out of curiosity and inspiration. Yes.
Yeah. But I think from what you describe, I think you'd love it. I think it would be right up your street. Yes. Royston, how about you?
Yeah, I'm very interested. I do know a couple of other people that have been on the course within my group, my study when I was training. But I'm away in most of November working, so I'm not sure whether I'll be able to commit the time at this stage. So I'll talk to you about it. I'll definitely get your book.
Yes.
I'll have a read, and perhaps I'll talk to you on email. We can.
Yes, do that. Do that. Absolutely.
I have to go now, I'm afraid. Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Penelope.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Just let's hear from a couple of people more. Iris, did you want to say something else? No. And Sebastian, how are you doing there?
Pretty good. I was just thinking about yeah, if I can find the time for the study club, because through my work with Gabriela, I'm learning a lot about your work as well.
Ah,
But
right.
I think
With
also
Gabriela.
the study club would be very fun. So
Yes.
I will see if I can find the time for it.
Yes, and if you're training with Gabrielle Bräuninger, then
Yes.
yes. Oh well, you'd have a trainer who would absolutely back you up. That's nice.
Yeah, true.
Yes, yes, that's valuable. Yes, thank you. And Hijab, and yes.
So yes, I'm very interested, to take on the course. I think I just started a fellowship as well, so I'm hoping I can take this on. It seems very flexible, and I've definitely tried going through your book 3 times on my own, and each time I come at a stumble block, and I cannot go beyond that. So this might be the way.
Absolutely. No, it would absolutely help you really find your way with it.
So I'm hoping I will be able to join, if not some Mondays, but with the recordings, one can, and if I can find somebody in my time zone, that would be nice.
Yes. Yes. And you see on the recordings, you'll have me talking you through each exploration as well.
And 2 hours per week seems doable. 1.5 hours for the thing, and about 1 hour, you say, approximately, or 2 hours.
Yes,
3.5, maybe
exchanges
3
and
to 4
reading.
hours.
Yeah.
So you read about a chapter a week, or is that how?
Oh, no, much less than that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We take about it's averaging about most chapters we take about 3 sessions over, because there's a lot in each chapter.
There is a lot. I've tried it, and there is a lot.
Yes.
So and every 2 weeks. So
yes, that's right. So there's time to assimilate in between.
Great. I hope I'll see you. Okay, thank you so much. Alrighty. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Yes. And Hesham, do you want to comment? And Anthony as well. We haven't heard from you.
It's super exciting. I'm always busy on Mondays. I don't think I'll be able to attend in person, and I'll have to see if my time considerations allow me to do the program otherwise. So, but it's very exciting work. Thank you so much for it. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, my fingers are crossed. Yes, that you make it in. Yes, Anthony. Hello.
Yeah, hi. I'm a bit on my guard when it is to sharing with other people, like subtle exercises. I've been enjoying a bit like the pull-ins in the book, or the pulls.
Yes.
But I missed I find it the awareness part. I skipped it. But it is something I think I did quite a lot when I was younger at school, when I missed all my classes. I was like walking around because I wanted to be a painter, something like that. So I was looking like that. I was in this sort of Zen thing in younger years. Now I'm glazing a lot. And so I'm not so sure about the commitment. And also through the screen, would it be nice to have also buddies?
Yeah.
Buddies it's not through the screen. Local, if there's like the list of maybe local people in all the different countries and everything.
Where are you?
I'll think about it.
Yes.
I'm in France.
You're in France, right? Yeah. Yes, I've got a couple of people in France, but there's not so many people in France. But email me about that. But the other thing is, if you come, you can always keep your screen off, because people do. As if you join in the online thing, you can always keep your screen off, and that again is an amazing option that we have with Zoom. And there are people who don't want to be seen, and that's fine. But to me, this work is living Zen. There's a Zen element to this Alexander work, and it sounds like you might get a lot from it. and it's great for painters.
I'm not a painter,
You're
but
not a painter.
okay.
Have you taken Alexander lessons? Have you
I did
taken
some Feldenkrais.
Oh yes, yes.
I've been doing a bit of Feldenkrais on YouTube,
Hmm.
and I also did just a bit of a martial art, which wasn't online, but I didn't feel very comfortable with the club.
Mm-hmm.
But a martial art called Ankai.
Not heard
And
of
I
that.
think it might interest you because it's very much about fascia. And
Interesting.
when I was doing the pullings, it reminded me a bit of this martial art.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think there's more match up with martial art too than we know. It's something I'd like to get into, what research there is on martial arts, and see how much that can also inform what we're doing. Thank you. Well, you're very welcome if you'd like to join. And we're now seriously over time, so thank you everybody for staying with us this long. Does anyone want to say anything else before we finish? So thank you everybody for coming along and for playing and engaging and sharing the discussions. And I'll be in touch later on and hope to see you and engage with you again soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I'm just tempted a little bit. Attila.
Yep.
It's just I'm very bad to people. I have had